Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use Google Notebook to score your student writing pieces. You're going to save hours of time grading and providing feedback, and we'll even connect the feedback to evidence-based revision strategies. Last but not least, we're going to create a Google podcast that will celebrate the growth of your student writers, looking at their initial draft all the way to the final version. And I'll even show you how you can jump in the podcast to ask the speakers questions. So let's get started. All right, let's get started with scoring those student writing pieces. First thing you want to do is click on Notebook LM, which will take you to their landing page. Click on Try Notebook. Now this will be the home page that you come to. So click on Create New. And you notice first thing you see is a pop-up window. We're going to close that for now and talk about the three different components to Notebook. The first component you'll see is the sources section. This is where we'll upload Google Docs, a PDF, or even a YouTube link. In the middle, you'll see the chat section. This is where you will interact with the artificial intelligence or AI part of Notebook. And then the third and final section is Google Studio. This is where you can create a briefing document or a FAQ or a study guide based off of the sources you upload. And you can even create what's called a deep dive conversation, otherwise known as a podcast. And we're going to do that toward the end of the video where we celebrate the growth of a writer, whether it be the whole class or an individual student. First, let's name this particular notebook. Then we want to begin to add our sources. Now, we all know that when you're scoring writing pieces, there's three components you must have. Number one, the passage or passages students were to read. Number two, the question they were to address. And number three, the writing scoring rubric. So those are saved on my hard drive. So I'm going to go find them. And I'm going to choose all three of those and upload it to Notebook. Now you'll notice that Notebook will tell you the type of format each source is. For example, the three here are PDFs. If you hover over the logo, you'll see three dots. If you click on it, it'll give you the option of removing a source or renaming it. Also, I want to point out that each source has a checkbox. This is very beneficial if you have a lot of sources, because if you want AI to interact with, say, only 2 or 3 sources, then you can click Select All Sources and then go back and click only the sources you want the AI to interact with. Now we need to upload our student writing pieces. So I'm going to go to Add Source, and they were saved as Google Docs. So I'm going to go to Google Docs. Okay, so I've found the student writing responses, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key after I click the first one. And this is just a quick tip. If you want to be able to select them all at the same time, hold down the Shift key, click on the last one, and it'll select everything in between. Now we're just going to wait for Google to upload these sources and take the next step. Okay, Notebook has uploaded each of the student writing pieces. So now we're going to ask Google Notebook to score each writing piece. What I need for you to do is under the video, look in the description box. There you will find a link that is titled Directions for On-Demand Writing with Notebook. Click on that link and you will open up a Google Doc. This will lead you to step 1 for scoring and analyzing student writing. Simply copy and paste the prompt that I've written. And anything that you see in red font is something that you would need to change to fit your specific assignment that you provide your students. So we're going to go back to Notebook and we're going to paste in the prompt and let it work its magic by hitting the blue arrow button. All right, Google Notebook has scored each of the student writing pieces. So you will notice that there's a student name, the element or category within the writing scoring rubric, a score, and then it provides justification for the score. But most important of all, it gives feedback to the student. Now, a question I commonly get is, well, how do you make sure you get this to each individual student? Here's a simple way to do that. Copy and paste the responses. And I'll stop with just those. Go into a blank Google Doc, paste it in. Now, once you've done that, you can scroll back up And I'm going to show you a quick way to separate each of the student writing scoring pieces. I'm going to click on the second name of a student, go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Break and go to Break, Section Break, Next Page. And that will move each student to a new Google Doc. All right, so let's go back to Notebook. Okay, so Notebook has now scored our student writing pieces. But let's now ask Google Notebook to tell us what the class strengths and weaknesses were, as well as what we should focus on as a teacher when we have a discussion over our writing and how to improve it. So you want to go back to the directions, go to Part B of Step 1, and you're simply going to copy and paste the prompt. Okay, Notebook has given us the class strengths and weaknesses. It's given that based on each element or category of the writing scoring rubric. It will even tell you which students scored strong in those areas and which students scored weak. And as you scroll down, you'll notice that it gives you the teacher focus. Now, there's something I want to point out that you can do every time Google Notebook produces a result, and that is you can save the note. So what I want to do is look for the button that says Save to Note. I want to click on that. And you'll notice that it immediately pops up on the bottom right under the Studio section. This is so that if you ever log out a Notebook and then come back to it, you'll never have to worry about losing this information. The other thing I'm going to do is actually go back to where the student responses were scored, and I want to do the same thing. A little bit later, I'm going to show you how you can actually turn these saved notes into sources that AI on Notebook will actually analyze. Now that we have our class strengths and weaknesses, as well as our teacher focus, it's now time to create a pie chart. So it won't actually create the illustration of a pie chart, but it will give you the information necessary for you to design one. And all you need to do is go back to the instructions in Part C and then copy and paste the following prompt into Google Notebook. So I pasted the prompt to create a pie chart or the information for it, and this is the result I received. I wanted to show you this because Google Notebook is not perfect, and you sometimes have to make adjustments. So for example, it says the sources provided do not include overall scores. Basically, what it's telling me is that the AI does not read the previous information it has provided you. It only looks to the sources on your left. That goes back to when I asked you earlier to create a note. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to turn a note into a source so that we can get the information for a pie chart. So click on the note, and remember, this is where all the anchor sets were scored. And I'm going to click Convert Source. When I do that, it's now going to become a source, and I can ask Notebook to create me a pie chart. Okay, Google Notebook has now given me the information I need to create a pie chart. So it tells me the percentage of students that received an overall score of a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it gives me which students scored in each category. Now that we have information from Google Notebook, we are ready to the goal setting and class discussion part of the revision process. The first thing I want you to do is go into Google Notebook, and this is where you're going to be thankful you saved all the information that Notebook provided into a note, which you see on the bottom right of my screen. You need to give ChatGPT or Gemini or some other LLM background information so it can help you come up with a script as well as what to do with your students during the classroom discussion and modeling and setting goals process. So let me walk you through that. The first thing I'm going to do is open up where each of the student writing pieces were scored, and I'm going to copy and paste them into a Google Doc. Now I'm going to do the same thing for improving student opinion writing, which was the class strengths and weaknesses that Google Notebook provided me. I'm going to copy and paste that into a Google Doc. I'm then going to save the Google Doc as a PDF, and then I'll show you the next step. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, and I'm going to upload the document which contains all my student scores, as well as the class strengths and weaknesses, which Google Notebook has prepared for me. So now ChatGPT has the background information. The next step is to tell it what to do with that information. So I'm going to go back to my directions and go in step 2, and I'm going to copy and paste the following prompt. And then I'm going to hit enter or the arrow button, and it's going to work its magic. All right, ChatGPT has now created a script for us to follow to talk about the class strengths with our students. It's going to talk about class weaknesses, go into facilitating goal setting with our students, which includes providing them with success criteria, and it even created a goal setting sheet, which our students will use when they begin the process of revising their papers. All right, let's do a catch and release and just reflect on what we've learned so far. The first step we took was to score and analyze our student writing. Within that framework, we also asked Notebook to analyze class data, which gave us the strengths of a class and the weakness. It also provided us with a teacher focus on what we should discuss with our kids. The last thing we did within step 1 was to create a pie chart so that we can show our students where we fell in each scoring category as a classroom community of learners. And then we moved into step 2, which is to use ChatGPT, taking the information that Notebook gave us, and then ask GPT to create a facilitating script that we can use, as well as a scoring rubric or goal sheet that the students could utilize when they revise their papers. Now we're ready to jump into the Jigsaw learning activity as part of that revision process. To create the Jigsaw learning activity, we're going to ask Google Notebook to create our home groups and our expert groups, which students will rotate into by focusing on the strengths and weaknesses of each individual writer. So you want to go back to your directions Google Doc. You're going to go to step 3 under Jigsaw learning activity, and you're going to copy and paste the following prompt into Google Notebook. I pasted the prompt into Notebook, and it has now created my home groups as well as my expert groups. You'll notice on your screen that it lists each group and it provides the names of the students in each group. It also tells you which students are in the expert groups and, most important of all, what the students should focus on when they rotate to their expert groups. Now, Notebook will even give you some brief information about the Jigsaw activity itself, but we're going to take it to a whole nother level by involving ChatGPT, which is going to create a facilitator's guide for us. To use ChatGPT or something like Gemini to create a facilitator's guide for the Jigsaw activity, once again, we must provide it with some background knowledge. Now, the way to do that is to use the information Notebook has created in regards to the home groups it created as well as the expert groups. Remember, the first thing you should do is always save to note so you never lose that information. Now, I've already done this, so I can either copy the information directly from the note I saved, or in this case, I'll simply go back and I will copy and paste everything it's told me in regards to the groups for the activity. The other thing you'll need to do after you paste that into ChatGPT is go back to your directions sheet under step 3, Jigsaw learning activity. Scroll down to where it says click this link for directions with script and resources. And there you will see the prompt that you need to copy and paste into ChatGPT after you have provided the Notebook information in it. Now, I've already done that, so we'll jump to ChatGPT. And you will see that ChatGPT has created a teacher script, which tells us what we could say to facilitate the Jigsaw activity, as well as actions we can take. It even goes so far as to tell you how you can model what it should look and sound like when students move into their expert groups. This is very important to reach that 1.2 effect size because it'll prevent 1 or 2 students only from dominating a conversation when they're in a group. Now, each student will be held accountable and be provided the support they need to be successful in their learning on how to revise their writing. Once students have completed the Jigsaw activity, you're now ready to move into step 4, which is the individual writing revision process. The first thing you want to do is to create a PDF version of your writing scoring rubric and then upload that or attach it to ChatGPT or Gemini. The next step is to click on the link for directions with script and resources, which you see in step 4. That will open up the following Google Doc. Simply copy the following prompt and paste it into ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT has now created a structure which I can follow for the individual student revision writing process. Now, it's going to tell me what my role is as a teacher, give me things that I can say. It's going to give directions for students on how they are to use their checklist as they revise their writing. And it's even going to provide an opportunity for me to catch the students in their learning process and model what effective writing looks like in order to help them improve their score. Once students have submitted their final version, you'll need to upload that into Google Notebook and ask it to score it just like we did in step 1. So now you will have a first draft scored as well as a final version scored. Once that's completed, now we're ready to celebrate the growth of the individual writer or the entire class. For this part of the video, I'm going to only focus on the individual writer, but I've also provided directions on how you can do it for your entire class. The first thing you want to do when you're in Notebook, you can either create a new notebook like I have, or you can upload the final version of each student's writing pieces in the same notebook we were originally working with. But for the sake of making the directions easy, I created a new notebook. You want to have the first draft and the final draft of each student uploaded. In this case, I've picked one student. You want to have the reading passages students were to read. You want to have the question they were to address and the writing scoring rubric, because we're going to ask Notebook to score the first draft and compare it to the final draft and create a podcast based on that growth. Here's how you do that. You're going to go back to the directions, and under the action, you're going to copy and paste the following prompt into Google Notebook. Now, I've already done this for the sake of saving time. And what it did, it created a new source or a new note, which I made into a source called Jim's Writing Journey, a podcast discussion. This is what we are going to select to create the podcast. So I have the Jim's Writing Journey selected. I'm going to go to Studio and click Customize under Deep Dive Conversation. Now, this is where I want to tell it to limit the podcast to 10 minutes. You can choose whatever amount of time you want. We could also tell it focus on the positives, such as growth of the student writing. And then you're going to click Generate. This is going to create your podcast, and we'll come back and see what it sounds like. All right, the podcast is complete, so let's take a listen to what it sounds like.
Okay, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into Jim's writing journey.
Yeah.
You know, you sent over his first and final drafts of this essay, and it's fascinating to see the growth. You know,
It really is.
we also had some expert analysis from a podcast discussion about his work and the original source materials that he used.
Right.
So,
All right, so this is a really cool feature that you can use by creating a podcast. Not only that, but you can actually download the podcast if you so choose, so that you can share it with students, put it on their Chromebook, let them take it home, and then they can play that for their parents. But in the next part, I'm going to show you how you can interact with the podcast or have your students interact with the podcast. Now let's actually join in a podcast conversation. You could do this one of two ways. You can create a notebook for each individual student, share the notebook, and then they can individually jump into a podcast. Or probably a more realistic way to do it is create a podcast that celebrates the growth of the entire class. Play it for the entire class, and if they have questions, raise your hand, and you can jump right in as a teacher. Let me show you how to do that. Click on the interactive mode, beta. That's going to open up your podcast in a new window. and we're going to hit play. And then when we're ready to join, we're going to click the join button.
Used to evaluate Jim's essay.
Yeah, that thing with all those different categories.
One of them was
Oh, go for it.
Hey there, could you please tell me how I grew as a writer in clarity and coherence?
That's a fantastic question, and it's awesome you're reflecting on your own writing.
Yeah, it's so cool that you're thinking about your own journey and how your ideas have evolved over time.
Okay, so we've been talking about Jim's writing and how he went from a vague idea to a really solid argument, right?
Yeah, and it applies to you too. You know, all of us have to start somewhere.
All right, isn't that really cool? You can actually join in, ask it questions, and it's going to give you responses and really base it upon the writing scoring rubric. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to sharing more with you.